2. Let's for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is coming and
Yep.
I'm
Right on time.
Greta's sitting over there, threw me off. Hey, welcome. We just called the meeting to order.
I don't know if I want to sit next to you, so I'm kind of.
Well, if it's any consolation, I was just at basketball practice yelling.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not too much, but hopefully that's what most of it is. Hopefully not.
Okay.
Can't be too sure these days.
Talk to Chris more than me. How about that?
Okay, I'm gonna keep my head down. Okay, so we've called to order. We just did the pledge, so sorry you missed that. But I'll give you a quick second there to settle in. And then we'll just need to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I second. All right, any discussion on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay, agenda's approved. 4.0 is our acknowledgements and recognitions, which we don't have any this evening. 5.0 is our community comments and our recognition of visitors. Welcome visitors. Thanks for joining us for the January 2025 business meeting here. Thanks for being here, and thanks to all of you on Zoom for being here as well.
Hey, I just looked at an email from Maria.
Got it. We're ahead of you. Got it.
Oh, cool. All right.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah.
And our community comment section. It's an opportunity for the public to address the board on an item included in the agenda in accordance with the guidelines printed at the end of the agenda. And we do have at least one comment for this evening. And we've got Maria Burnett, and she's coming in live on Zoom. Maria, if you're there and you can hear us, go ahead and unmute.
I think I did.
Okay, great. We got you.
Perfect.
Okay, I was just, I know it's the agenda item, which is 8.3. Chris and Eric was in on the LIC meeting that we had last night. So just to make sure that this is like a, how the chairperson told me, a temporary approval, because we do have to let this new parent committee have time to review the IPP and make any comments or adjustments, deletions, or whatever they want to do. So we'll be working on that with next month. So it's like, it's not really a final stamp, but temporary stamp of approval.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for providing that context. And we'll chat a bit more about that when we get to that item too. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. And I believe that is all the comments we have signed up for tonight. So we'll move on to 6.0, which are our reports. 6.1 is our principal's report. Welcome, Mr. Belangi.
Good evening, everybody. All right. So a little update in the school, and I know Greta will share some stuff as well, but in our elementary school, Sawtooth Bond Elementary, we continue to recognize the junior Viking values of being respectful, being responsible, being their best. We've recognized over 100 students at our monthly Sawtooth assemblies in the ACA. Also this month, we've been focusing on acceptance and inclusion as our theme for the month. And we highlighted this on January 15th during our Live Unified Day, where members of our Unified Club went into elementary classrooms, read stories, talked about topics of inclusion and acceptance. And the elementary students worked on a big art mosaic that's on display in the hallway outside of the cafeteria that represents how, despite individuality, we can all contribute to something greater as a united community. So that's on display in the hallway outside of the cafeteria. Also, another fun update from our elementary school. Last week, fifth graders started leading our elementary school in the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag in English, as well as the pledge to the flag of Grand Portage in Ojibwe. And so that's been a really fun addition to our morning routine. And that came from fifth graders asking to be engaged and lead that in our elementary schools. So that's been a really fun new thing that we are doing the first day of every week, as we have been with the pledge to the flag of the United States of America. In our middle and high school, there is an ASVAB career exploration test coming up on February 6th that is open to juniors and seniors. This is a multi-aptitude test. It's commonly given in the military, but it is used to identify potential career options based off of aptitude, abilities, and interests in students. And so that's coming up on the 6th, and juniors and seniors can get signed up for that. Also tomorrow, we're presenting to our 9th and 12th graders and during advisory about the timber frame building class happening at Northhouse Folk School in April. And so this is something that's been going on at the school for a couple of decades now. They spend a week down at Northhouse and build a structure for a specific purpose. And so we've got our outdoor classroom there is one of the structures one year that was built. The bridge going over to the community center is another structure that was built. And so we've got a teacher from the folk school and one of our teachers at school would just be presenting to students tomorrow who are interested in this week-long experience. And then also tonight, if we wrap up the meeting by 6:30, our one-act play crew is rehearsing right now for their performance of Harper's Promise. And tonight at 6:30, they're doing a little free preview event for the community in the ACA at 6:30. So I invite you all to head on over there and check out that performance. And then last week was the end of our semester, and tomorrow grades will be finalized for first semester halfway through the school year.
Got any last minute homework, Gretel?
Great. Any questions? All sounds good. Yeah.
Thank you, folks.
Best of luck on the second semester.
Yeah, there we go.
Look great.
Is that a request?
It's up to you.
All right, well, we'll do that.
Since we're building level stuff.
Sure. Well, let's jump ahead to the student board report 6.3, Greta Youngdahl to dovetail with the principal report. Hello, Greta. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good to see you.
So I got the opportunity to meet you all the other day, but if you happen to forget, I'm Greta Youngdahl and I'm the student school board representative this year. I'm really excited to work with all you guys. Semester 2 has just begun this week after our unexpected yet very needed extended weekend. Students have been very busy turning in work and studying and taking finals. Winter sports have been in full force. Our alpine ski team just competed in a double race in the freezing cold temps. The boys team took first place in both races, whereas the girls team faced some tougher competition. With 5 races so far in this season, the boys have had a clean sweep and they've gotten first place at all of them.
Wow.
And our girls have also been doing very well, finishing second at every race, except for the last double race. Nordic skiing has also been fantastic this season. The younger kids are especially thriving right now. They've been placing at races and taking the extra time to do a lot of skiing on their own. At almost every race, they've had somebody on the podium, which is super exciting. And their sections are coming up, so we'll stay tuned for that. Our girls basketball team won their first game against Fond du Lac the other day, which gives them the record of 1-13. They're placed 15th in the conference at this moment. And despite this, they have been putting a lot of heart on the court. This year is definitely a building year for them. And then for the boys basketball team, they just had a really good win against Mesabi East, which makes them 5-8 overall and 4-6 in the conference. They had a rocky start to their season, but they've been showing their potential recently. And then these next couple of games will show how the rest of their season will go. And then for clubs this month, our Varsity Knowledge Bowl just had their first meet last Wednesday, and they took first place. And then, as Mr. Belandri said, the one-act play started. There's about like 10 or so students participating this year. And then tomorrow, they're on their way to 2 harbors to compete with other schools. And then the Unified Club did an art takeover to teach the elementary students all about inclusion. And then last week on Unified Day, they read to the preschool class and had a lunch discussion on what it means to be kind and what Unified Day is all about. And lastly, Envirothon received their scenario for 2025. And their project tackles forestry, conservation, and land management. And they're taking a deeper dive into how that all ties into native land. And that about sums it up with the student life lately. And if you guys have any questions, you can reach out to me through my email. And yeah, thanks.
I feel like I have to clap or something. Really good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Greta. Could you talk us through a little bit about what the Knowledge Bowl program looks like? Like, what's the format and how that works? Do you know much about that?
I know a little bit. So they meet, our varsity, I think, meets every Tuesday and Thursday, I wanna say, in Mr. Lifty's room. And then they have probably a meet like every other week. I'm not sure how their schedule is exactly, but last week was their first one. And they've been pretty successful, like.
And what is that like? What do they do?
Well, they go to, as far as I know, they go to like the other schools and there's like a bunch of teams and they get a question.
They work in teams, I think.
Yeah,
work in teams, then they get
Mm-hmm,
questions.
yeah, I
So when they're
wish I could tell you
practicing,
more.
getting these like trivia like questions.
Yeah,
Okay,
My son is the speaker for the Varsity Knowledge Bowl, and he says it's kind of like trivia.
Yeah.
But more formal.
sure.
And then last year they went to state, one conference went to state. What was
One
it?
of them did, yeah.
And
And the year before they did.
they had like some sort of celebration. He was like, we all showed up in our sweatpants and all the other teams showed up in their suits. So so even my son, who's like really deep in this now, year 2, is clueless about what they're really doing, but he does well enough to, take first place.
Yeah.
It's very much a team sport. Like, they
Yeah.
work in the
It
small
is.
teams and they have to come up with an answer as a team.
Sure.
And only one person on
Cool.
the team gets
Can
to
speak
speak,
it
which is
out.
why, like, I know Luke's the speaker
Gotcha.
for the varsity team, and
Yeah.
they get their.
It's kind of like
questions
Family
answered.
Feud.
A little bit. But
Nice.
then I'm always like, well, was there a question you're really proud you got right? And he's like, we get them all right, Mom.
So what's we were just informed that the first semester just ended, second semester starting. What's the vibe amongst your student body? And how's everybody feeling halfway through the year?
I think everyone's feeling very excited. I'm very excited first. Cause
Yeah.
now I'm closer to being a senior.
Okay.
It's true.
Cool.
Who's the secretary now?
Of our, we don't have a secretary on the board.
Oh,
Clerk.
I'm the clerk.
Clerk.
oh, it's gonna be
So,
some
like,
great minutes.
secretarial-
Chairman Shirley wanted to know the vibe.
I was like waiting for him to throw out like that sounds Sigma. Kay is the one who takes our.
Oh, okay.
So
I
she
do not
knows.
include personal.
Inquired about the vibe.
I can explain to you what that means later. All right, well, awesome. Thank you, Greta. Appreciate that and your thorough report.
For sure.
Would you like to go next?
Sure, yeah.
Superintendent report 6.2.
Sure. There's a few things in my report I want to cover. First, in my report, I offer a thank you to some of our staff members. It's been kind of a week around Cook County schools with cold weather, technology issues, snow plowing, pulling long days, and then having our staff kind of prepare for not having internet and then having internet. So just a thank you to our staff. The flexibility, the hard work, the willingness to just roll up their sleeves and get stuff done is really, really, really appreciated. Another celebration is our bond rating, our bond sales took place. And we had a really good rating. And then when we sold our bonds, we got an interest rate of just over 4%, which is very low. And that's really due to the fiscal management of this board over the last 5 to 6 years. So you can pat yourself on the back for having gotten that great rating and then having a good sale. When you get into the math of that, it means that the taxpayers will ultimately end up paying about $3 million less than projected because of the good rating and the good bond sale. So it's a celebration for our community all the way around and part of the conversation about what we do next. In my report is a document with a list of legislative priorities that I've put together for board members to know and use as you communicate with our representatives and our senators. Looking at some things that are important to us. The special ed cross subsidy will always be a big deal to Cook County, and the more that the legislature can target chipping away at that helps us a great deal. And a couple other things I put in there is the required now unemployment insurance for hourly staff during the summer. That was a mandate put in place. And there was only 2 years of funding put in place to cover the cost of that. So it falls back on the back of the districts if the legislature doesn't come up and fund what they did. So that is a legislative priority for all school districts in Minnesota. And then the last top one that I listed was last session, Senator House-Child championed seasonal recreational property levy replacement bill. The bill wouldn't increase the money to our district, but the bill would reduce the tax burden of the levies, yes, the levy on our homeowners, essentially, and our commercial businesses. So that bill is a big deal to Cook County residents, and I think it would bode well for that to pass for any district that has a high seasonal recreational.
AKA the Jesse Ventura repeal bill.
Yep.
So has it got a good chance?
I don't think it does, but it's definitely worth pushing for.
Is it a party line thing or is it a regional issue or both?
I think it's a fiscal issue that benefits about 35 to 45 districts in the state heavily. And the rest of the state would be like,
Right. So it's regional.
It's a regional thing, yeah.
Bummer.
But the way in the past, there's been talk about moving seasonal rec back to being part of our levy referendum. And while that was dead on arrival, I did think that House-Child's strategy with this one was a little bit smarter. Rather than move them into a different tax area, it just funnels the money from St. Paul and then back to the district homeowner. So it's a different approach. I think maybe it has a chance. In a smoke-filled room at the end of the session when they're cutting deals, you never know what's going to get there. So I've got those listed there for you, board members, to take a look at and make sure you have working knowledge as you're communicating with the legislators. And then last but not least, at the top of my report, I shared about the meeting this morning. And it's an exciting meeting. I'm grateful for Dan and for April Wallstrup to join me. Rena was going to go, but she ended up not able to go. We went to IRRB with Gary Cirkvenick, who you met a month or two ago from the Costin group. And interestingly, when we got there, we sat down and the people that walked out of the conference room ahead of us were the people from the Aiken School District. And if you remember when he was here, he talked a little bit about trying to work with a project in Aiken and then a project here in Cook County and seeing if he could legislatively line that up with IRRB funding. So he had both districts there this morning, speaking with the folks at IRRB. We walked through what took place last November and what passed, what did not pass, and ultimately put an ask for IRRB to provide some matching funds if the district wants to go out next November. So rather than asking for 9 million, maybe we were asking for a halvesy, a 4.5 and a 4.5, or a 5 and a 5. We put the ask out there in the pitch. Now we have to see what happens. This is separate from general fund dollars in the legislature, which is important to remember. The money's there. It's just a matter of who gets it. So it's about getting the politics to line up, and that's why we have.
What was the vibe? As our chairman would say.
It was really positive. I walked out of there going, wow. I mean, there's even talk about, well, what about a little bigger dollar amount?
Oh.
And for us as a board, we have to be thinking about, okay, well, if it's a match of 7 and 7, that means we're asking our taxpayers for 7, not 4 or 5. And what's politically helpable to our public going back out next November. So that's a decision we'll have to make in the near future. And I want you to think about that. If we went back to the public and said, we cut it in half, we're asking you for 4.5 or 5. How does that resonate with the public come next November? So the vibe was good. It was very positive. It felt like Gary's doing his job, which is trying to line up the right pieces to the puzzle.
And the Aiken thing, I forget. I remember the whole spiel, but the Aiken thing helps us if they're going out, or hurts us, or
In Gary's mind, it helps us.
Okay.
It's part of the chess match of getting Republican and Democratic representatives and
oh,
senators
yeah, that's right.
on
Yep,
different
yep, yep.
committees in power
That
positions.
they both get something out of it. Got it.
Right.
Does Gary, this is kind of, does Gary have perspective on the differences for the, like, if we're doing this election in November, I mean, that's a pretty different election because it's not a year of a general election.
Correct.
I mean, does he like, is that good or bad? I mean, demographics of who will vote and who will care.
It's 95% of the time, it's good. It's good.
Okay, that's what I would think.
Yeah, and why it makes a lot of sense to try to get it now, right? Not only is it all the stuff is here and the scale of all the people being here and contractors, but most importantly, in Cook County next November, there are no other elections.
Yeah, so it's the people that pay attention and care.
Correct.
Okay.
Not lost in the noise of all the other stuff, right? And that's why if Quinn, you may or may not have, I'm trying to remember, you may not have been on the board yet. I showed a document put together by ICS. There are 4 dates in the calendar year when we can go out for a referendum.
Yeah, I wasn't on the board, but I saw that.
Saw that document?
Yep.
Yeah, in November, a year out, that's kind of the last one. There was one in August, there was one in like April. There's 4 of them, and a lot of districts go out for referendums in April or August. So it's completely separate from referendum.
Is there any way we could like maybe get some people together and be like, what do you think of this? And get a vibe of like, yeah, half and half, that's better. Or like, you guys lost your damn mind, you just asked us for, or there's both and, I don't know, I'd like to have a better handle on that.
Yeah, so one of the things in the works is Todd Rapp, who you've met, does strategic survey work to get that pulse. And he was going back he was doing a deep dive into the voting results. And then one of our next conversations is, should we go and do some kind of a survey so we can get a dipstick on, would the public say yes to?
They do focus groups. I feel like the thing where we say, yeah, come on, and only 10 people show up. I feel like we should like feed like 30 people and say, okay, what do you think? Don't hold back.
Well, that's an option. They'll do a statistically reliable survey, but we can do focus groups and things like that as well.
I mean, I don't know, nothing that's cost prohibitive or anything, but yeah.
Right.
For sure. I mean, it's
How do
it's
you
not
get the vibe?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's for sure. And we have to make that, we have like 6 months before we have to make that decision. So
Yep.
between now and then that's part of what we need to do, is kind of understand if there's a realistic path forward. But, being at the meeting today, it was super encouraging about the way that they were receptive and understood the issue.
But that's only half the battle.
Right.
That's
That's
not
what
the
I'm
battle,
saying.
but I mean, I think a proposal to go back to the voters just to re-ask the question again is, perhaps not the best strategy, but if, I just think if we're gonna have a viable path forward, coming back with hey, we got the IRRB to cut that number in half. We're saving $3 million on our other bond sale because we had a good bond rating, with principal and interest payments. Maybe we get some of the sales tax exemption stuff worked out with the legislature. It's kind of like a puzzle that we can come back, and it's a different type of ask then. It's like, we're not asking you to bear all of this. We've reduced the cost significantly. So instead of it being $8 per month, it's now $4 or $3 per month, right? The tax impact. And I think that's a compelling thing personally. And it was just as a kind of to get this conversation out of the gates, it was really encouraging the way that the folks there were sort of heard the issue and what we've kind of done already with a successful referendum, that the community has already kind of like got a fair amount of skin in the game. They were like, okay, yeah, that's like good to know.
Right.
And there's a process that we have to go through in order to kind of like formally seek that money, but they were, sort of inviting us into that for sure.
So let me ask this, sorry to keep belaboring this, especially if there's a 6:30 event people are trying to get to and I'm the guy holding it up. But like, I think about my own 9-to-5 job and different pockets of money I can go for, my odds of getting them, because I've been burnt in the past where I put like tons of man hours into a certain grant and then just falls apart. So like, this effort isn't necessarily like something that's gonna cost a lot, because we talk about the cost of like hiring a consultant. Well, then he had the pitch that, like, there was a trail that was basically gonna, if we get that, that's basically kind of a wash, and that's the minimum. So what's the man hours, do you think, on your end, and maybe other administrative folks, hey, Teresa, I don't know, but like, is there a cost associated there with this effort, or?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like today, there was a whole day.
Mhm.
Being on the road and then there's gonna be filling out the application and all that. So absolutely, there's a cost and, I think that's the question. Should we be as a school district trying to champion a better environment for our students?
Hmm.
I kind of think that's what I get paid to do.
Well, but okay, but hold on here. So like, not to go back to this, but our voters determined that we did that in one regard and we didn't do that, that the other two weren't as essential or whatever their thinking was. And we don't know their thinking, right? I mean, maybe it was just, that's enough. But like, I don't know. I don't know. I guess not to muddy the waters or being the stick in the mud, but I've had concerns throughout this process and I continue to. Not like, oh no, that this is wrong, but just like little minor concerns. But anyway, all
Well,
right.
for us, our constituents are the voters.
Right.
For Chris as the superintendent, that's not, like, what he drives is not necessarily driven by the voters, right?
Right.
So his perspective is potentially a little different.
Saying yes or no?
Being a better environment for the students, that's what.
Yeah, and we're not gonna do it unless it's the will of the board. So there's that, right? Like you're my boss, and I think what is the vibe out there is a really relevant question. I mean, we have a really bright connected student here. We could ask, what's the vibe? And if you're asking students that are in track, softball, families, this was a big downer. And that's a big group of students and a big group of families. And I hear them all day,
Right, but the voters told us something else 2 months ago,
It
so.
depends again on how you interpret that, though. Voters told us not this.
Right.
Voters, when we put
So the half and half might be more
a
balanced.
new proposal,
Yeah.
they might, we'll find out. They might be like, we shut that down and we're shutting it down again, or they might be like, oh, this is more palatable. Let's go for it.
I mean, as I understand it, it was really very close on question 2, right? So I think it's,
2%, 170 votes.
yeah, so I mean, you feel like that's
Oh.
like, okay, we went back and we tried to make it more palatable is not, again, I mean, that just seems.
But some of the consultants that we talked to said, if we weren't in a presidential election, we would have had a different turnout that would have likely skewed it.
I'm not necessarily buying that argument. I don't know.
But it just,
I think that thing could go 50-50. I
Well,
think you can
it's
have
not
some.
50-50. They have data on it. They make that recommendation because the data says that they're more successful when it's not during a presidential election.
School referendums.
Correct.
So, if we would have
Overwhelming.
waited till next year, maybe we would have gotten all 3 questions answered, but the timing wasn't right because of the way everything kind of came together to wait,
Well, I guess I'm skeptical of that because I've heard from different people who aren't, how do I put this politely, who are progressive voters who voted no on 2 and 3 or 3. So that's why I'm a little skeptical about this. Oh, if it's not a presidential election year, plus the fact that we don't live in central Minnesota or an overwhelmingly red district to begin with. So I don't know.
Well, it's I think fair to say that general like statistic is perhaps a little different here, and that was part of the reason why we did it, because they were like, well, you guys have a reasonable chance. If you were somewhere else, it would have been this is a bad idea. So anyway, but that's kind of the update. I think
It went well.
We'll kind of keep.
I'll put being a negative Nancy. How about that?
Okay, thank you. All right,
I would argue that your voice is important for us to hear,
for sure.
negative or positive.
Okay, so we have 6.4 are some school board reports, and these from board members. Me and Rena have reports in here. We moved them out of the consent agenda and into the report section for this just to give the opportunity, unfortunately, Rena isn't with us tonight to speak about her experience, but we were just gonna give a quick recap about the conference that we went to last week in Minneapolis, the MSBA conference. So I'll just kind of talk briefly about my experience and so it was a great conference. Definitely worth the while again to go down there. They always do a really good job of pulling in a engaging keynote speaker. So both Rena and I really enjoyed that. It was a guy from rural Louisiana who is a music teacher and he's won a lot of awards. Most notably, the Grammys gives out a music educator award that he won. And he kind of talked about his experience, you know, and his journey to winning that award. And he's a saxophonist. He walked into the auditorium playing the saxophone and he was like holding it the whole time and giving a spiel, but he, you know, he had a real uplifting message and just kind of a good reminder that like, you know, we need to continue to, you know, find our purpose and continue to support educators and make sure that we let them know, excuse me, because it's a hard job.
Dude's from Minnesota?
No, he's from Louisiana.
Oh, you said that, okay.
Yeah. And then he played a very rousing rendition of I Will Always Love You on the saxophone to end his talk. It was kind of amazing.
Like the Whitney Houston?
Yeah. It was pretty impressive. So that was great. And then
Did you break out the song?
I mean, he was playing that part on the saxophone. It was like, you didn't need to. So, that was cool. But, yeah, Rena and I attended that. We both attended the MSBA Director District 11 meeting, which MSBA has a board made up of board members from 13 different regions in the state. And we were in the region 11, so we went to that meeting. There was an election for our region.
How big is this region?
It's pretty big.
Oh,
Geographically, it's quite large. It's like the US 8th district or something. It's pretty darn big.
Where's the person from?
Our representative is from Rock Ridge.
Oh,
And so
okay.
there was an election. I was particularly interested to go to this because there was an election this year. It was up, he served like 3 or 4 year terms or something. So it was up for election. He was reelected to serve. One of the interesting things that was mentioned was that MSBA, you know, does a similar thing to what like the like political parties do in terms of like getting resolutions and like having like a convention and stuff and having them pass stuff in order to get onto MSBA's legislative platform. And so they take 8 delegates from each district to then come to a conference and then like bring resolutions and they vote on them. And then the ones that kind of make it to the level end up going on MSBA's legislative platform. And that's what they're gonna then work on, you know, in their capacity at the state and lobbying the legislature. So there's an opportunity to do that this summer. They'll elect events for a couple of years. They'll elect 8 people. So that's coming down the pike. But the one interesting thing that he mentioned was, he said, I don't think that there's a single school district in Region 11 that is not in the red financially, and that isn't making,
And you said that's
and that
wrong,
isn't
dude.
making cuts. And we decided not to correct the record in front of everybody, but it was interesting just to hear that feedback of sort of our peer districts and sort of regional districts that, you know, people are they're hurting financially, and so we should feel good that we're kind of navigating that.
So circling back to that issue about the Jesse Ventura thing, you know, where the cabins don't gotta pay, that wouldn't help that issue. Like those issues it's more of a moral issue that they pay their fair share and cut our thing. It's not bringing, as you said,
No,
bringing
not more
revenue
money.
to help that problem.
No, it lowers the burden on the residents.
Yeah.
So anyways, that was good. And then I attended 3 different like workshops. The way that this is structured, they have a million different to choose from. That a lot of them happen concurrently. You can only go to, you know, 3 kind of maximum over the time because there's 3 separate sessions. So I went to one on just kind of an overview about some change in labor laws at the last session. I put a few highlights in the report here, and that was interesting. I went to one about the implementation of the Title IX final rule, which was supposed to be rolling out, but a judge in Kentucky or something just stopped that from happening. So we're rolling back to the 2020 Title IX rules. So for those of you that are involved in that, if you haven't heard that yet, that's the deal. We're going back to the 2020 Title IX rules. And if there's any sort of like district policy that we need to update to align with that, that's something we should be looking at. And then really interestingly, I went to a student-led discussion about cell phones at North Branch. And so they had 3 students there that led the discussion. There was a couple board members and their principal. And they were talking about how they went from a like free for all, like no cell phone policy. People could just have their phones whenever they want, whatever, no restrictions, to a policy. And how they navigated that. And it was really interesting to hear the student voice, you know, in terms of how they going into when there was no restrictions, everybody felt like, yeah, of course, this is fine. This is not a problem. Our phones are not a distraction for us. That was sort of them looking back. And then sort of now current day, now that they have some restrictions in place, which is basically you can't have your phones out in class, you can have them passing time and at lunch. We're all like, yeah, this has actually been really helpful. It's cut down behavioral issues and stuff, but they had a kind of an interesting approach in terms of how they implemented it, because they did a lot of focus groups with staff and students and stuff in the community before deciding on what they were going to do. And they basically learned that staff didn't want to have to deal with like policing this all the time and it being a big distraction. So they came up with like an internal like chat function where the teachers on their computer can send like a private chat that goes to their like behavior team. And that says like, someone so-and-so has a phone out in my room. So the teacher sees the phone, they just type it into the chat. They don't stop teaching. The behavior team comes into the room and like takes the student to the hall, takes their phone and sends them back in. And like the teacher doesn't stop. And
team that swoops in.
they swoop in. Yeah, so they swoop in. So you gotta have a behavior team to swoop in. But so it was like zero tolerance for, it wasn't like warnings or whatever, so it wasn't distracting the class. So it's kind of interesting. And they've got won't go into all the details, but the kind of the long and short of it is they put a lot of like effort into kind of making sure they got it close to right at the outset by like engaging a lot of groups. And then they did a lot of like thorough communication. They did a bunch of videos, like they produced a bunch of videos and pushed those out to like students in the community and like whatever, to kind of like let them know what was happening and how it's going. And it was just nice. And it was like positive across the board. The students were happy with it. The board was happy with it. The principal was feeling good about it. So it was just interesting as we kind of like continue to navigate that as like kind of a model of some successful stuff. So that was that piece. And then the last little thing I would say that, and this was just on Rena's report, she she commented to me, one of the sessions that she went to was on unlocking career and technical education. And this was put on by some folks from the Department of Ed. And she just felt like it was pretty inspiring in terms of like the sort of breadth of options and the like ways that you can go about that topic. And it's not always just your typical, like maybe what you think of like
Wood shop
or whatever. There were, you know, things on more professional tracks and things like that like are career oriented ways to get funding and whatever, and kind of start developing some of that in your school. Career type stuff that is, not just the trade. So she could talk more detailed on that, but she felt like that was there's maybe something there. So anyway, so that's our school board reports.
Are you always gonna give a report, or just because of the conference?
Well, I mean, I did because I went to the conference.
Oh, okay.
We were any board, in the past, we would somewhat regularly on and off board members would submit a report and it would go into our consent agenda, so we wouldn't necessarily talk about it, but you could look through it.
Hmm.
So if you ever are compelled to report in, you're certainly welcome to do that and do it from time to time.
More often when you're having specific meetings or maybe
A collaborative meeting or an LIEC meeting.
LIC.
Yeah, you could report it.
negotiations, it seems like Chris generally brings back the information, but there's quite a few other meetings that we've done. I'm not currently on it, but
So, yep, no, don't worry. All right, so let's move on to our consent agenda. Oh, yes,
Am I allowed to leave?
you are welcome
that's
to.
right
leave
after
whenever.
your student report. And that's
I
what
just
most
wanna make
people are,
sure.
but most.
No worries.
Representatives of them.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
You're of course
Hear all the
always welcome
fun.
to stay as long as you want.
I'll see you guys.
All right,
Thanks, Chris. See you later.
take care. Okay, so 7.0 is our consent agenda. And if there's anything that needs to be pulled for further discussion, let us know. Otherwise, we just need a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Alright.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, consent agenda approved. 8.0 are discussion and action items. 8.1 is to accept the December 2024 expenditure revenue report here in our packet. And Ms. Oberg is here. Hello.
Hello.
Let's see, what do you got for us?
I've got the December report, which is 50% of the year, if you're looking at the far right column. I think we're tracking really well. Now is the time kind of when we're waiting for state funding to come in, so it might not, that's why you don't see a direct 50% of funding on the revenue side, because there'll be state payments coming in January. But nothing jumps out at me that I would draw your attention to. I do notice that also like the food service were, above expenses than revenues, but I think that's all just kind of catch up and where we're at in the middle of the year. But I guess just also as part of this report and work that I've been working on lately is just getting ready for the bond sales and organizing myself to get those organized in the financial system. So then they're presented to you in a organized manner. So that's something I'm working on. And then as well, I think later on in the agenda, the IPP, I've been working on the impact aid application, and that is a part of that application. And so that is why we need that approved tonight, so that we can submit that application for the federal funding that is based on the tribal lands. And so those are just a few things that I've been working on, and if anyone has any questions for me.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, and then just a motion then.
Go for it, dude. I know you want to.
Motion. Okay, we got a motion from Quinn,
Second?
okay, second from Eric. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 8.2 is to approve the resolution to ratify the sale of bonds. So we've got the resolution here in our packet. So it's a resolution relating to 24,175,000 general obligation school building bonds, series 2025A. Ratifying the award of sale, prescribing the form and details, and providing for the payment thereof. That's what we've got here.
And after the meeting, we need some signatures on those documents.
Okay. So I know Chris mentioned a little bit at the outset that we had the sale was successful. We got a good, really great bid.
Isn't TD Securities Canadian, or am I dreaming that?
I have no idea.
I'm not sure.
Like they got the green logo, because it's all Canada, there's all these TD banks.
I believe it's out of New York, so.
Oh, okay.
potentially-
Big golly.
Could be a connection, yeah. A low bid, 4.051.
So we just need a motion.
Make that motion.
Second.
Okay, further discussion?
This is a process we haven't gone through a ton, even, like, I've been on here a long time, so I feel like I wanna ask questions, but I don't even know what what is the question I'm supposed to be asking?
I don't know if they're from Canada, that's not the right.
That might be it, I don't know.
We covered that.
There, in the document, it does say TD Securities, parentheses, USA, so I bet there's,
Yeah,
but it's
Probably
very much in
multiple.
Canada.
Yeah.
well, it just feels like it's like the bank up there, that, and a couple others.
The governance question would be process, right? And so we went through the bond rating first, right? We get rated at a, something, and then ultimately it goes out to bid to the market. And we have consultants that help us do that push it out there in all their ways. And what you see right there at the beginning is all of the responders and who was lowest. And so from a due process standpoint, you can see that it went out to a bunch of different folks, a bunch of different companies bid on it. And the favorable bid of 4.05 is better than the worst one at 4.26, right? So ultimately then our consultants say, all right, you're good, now just ratify it and away it goes. And now we start paying back debt service and investing and all those mechanics.
Right, so that basically just means this company is gonna, they're buying the bonds, we're getting that lump sum
Yep.
of 24,175,000, and then the taxpayers are gonna pay back for the principal and interest over the period of time. And that's the interest rate on that principal of 24 million bucks. So we end up having to pay the projected amount when we went through all the costing and trying to figure this out and how much it's gonna cost the taxpayers. We thought it was gonna cost about $39 million total in principal and interest payments. And that's kind of how we projected this out. With this interest rate that we got, it's gonna end up being about $36 million of total payback, principal and interest. So the taxpayers are getting a bit of a break because we got this great interest rate, which is in large part due to us having a good bond rating.
Correct.
So it's a more secure investment for these people. They're feeling better about making this investment. They're gonna get their money back because we're proven to pay our bills.
If a district did this 10 years ago, was the rate still 4% or was it a lot lower?
It fluctuates with the regular market, right? So 10 years ago, what were our rates?
A lot lower.
So then, yes, it would have been a lot
Oh,
lower.
interesting. That was just trivia. It had nothing to do with
Yeah,
any kind of.
it's a different market, but it's still the general market.
Yeah,
So it's still a mortgage.
yeah.
So. Yep, and then this is just like the last step, kind of to make it all so. So,
For the board, yeah.
yep. Any other questions? All those in favor?
I,
Aye. Those opposed? The resolution is adopted. All right, 8.3 is to approve the IPP for 2025.
so IPP, cause sorry, I had to leave the meeting last night because I was driving, but they didn't make they approved it, but they didn't make any modifications, huh?
They basically just said pass it at the board level and
Okay.
they'll revisit it. So they didn't have quorum either.
Oh, that's right. They didn't have a quorum. So is
So-
that legally kosher then, or?
Well, we ultimately approve it as a board. So yeah.
I thought it had to legally be approved by a parent committee or the tribe or somebody.
Well, we can't hold it up. It's got to go in. So
Yeah.
we're approving it and sending it in.
Right, and I mean, you can certainly make the motion that you're approving it pending, additional modifications or whatever.
Or as Maria said, you could just change it again next month. It's a living, breathing document.
Right,
Right.
So
I do wanna I don't know if this document came from your files or what, but we might wanna just take out some of the fiscal year things, cause they're quite old in there. Fiscal year 23 impacted.
typos, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just some of that kind of stuff. We could even take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the fiscal year impacting the application or something where we're just more generalizing those.
Right.
Yeah,
And Quinn, for your sake, this is an annual thing.
Okay.
So the LIEC, which meets monthly, they approve it, the board approves it, it goes into that annual application in January and end of January, right? Every year. And then that drives some revenue we get from the federal government.
based on tribal lands that, I mean, basically it's the lands that aren't taxed, so then we're getting the federal dollars from the federal government, essentially.
And if we were in a district, say, with a big Air Force base or something, it would be the same revenue stream. It's replacing non-taxed.
And the way we generate it, because there's different ways to calculate it, and so like if we had a big air base, it might be based on employees who work on the base and their children who are, but our application typically falls into the line of students living on tribal lands. So any student living on tribal lands.
Right.
So,
It's like a census.
right.
So we approve it now. We might approve it later if there's modifications made by the parent committee.
And then the kind of the other piece to it is on an annual basis, the LAEC, the band basically gets to report back and say if we're in concurrence with this, like, did we do what we said we were gonna do? And they have the opportunity to say no or yes.
And that's more tied to the Minnesota Indiana.
Yeah, that's state money.
State.
I don't think there's a, not necessarily, I think,
But isn't it for the IPP though?
I
If we're in
think they can
concurrence?
they can write something that says the thing isn't in concurrence, but it's not like the state where there's a piece of paper that's gotta be signed.
Right.
Where the LIC has to say you are in concurrence with, the AIEA funding. Yeah, I think it's two
This is
different
a
things.
meeting.
Is it concurrence or compliance? Or maybe just.
I think it's concurrence,
Yeah,
or I don't know, you could.
I think concurrence is the
That's in the
word
fall.
they use.
We have the fall.
That's in the fall,
Yeah,
yeah,
but-
so,
This is an annual
So,
process, so.
we rehauled the IPP back when I was on the parent committee 3 years
We
ago.
don't take public comment at a board meeting.
No,
So,
somebody's not muted.
yeah, all right, so let's just roll on and we'll come back to this if we need to.
Great. Okay, so do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 8.4 is to approve the READ Act MOU, which is here in the packet. And this is with the CCEA.
Yeah, so when the READ Act was passed by the legislature, it was mandated in statute that the Education Minnesota and MSBA craft a model MOU. And then it was in law that we had to come up with one. And that rarely happens when they say you must. So we had to by law. And so I and Teresa sat down with the negotiations team with CCEA. We did get revenue for implementation of READ Act training. The cost of this will exceed the revenue we get, and we made that very clear with CCEA. You're dipping in further than the revenue we're being given for this. But as anyone who's been at the negotiations table knows, that's the way it kind of rolls. So what our teachers did voice really gratefulness for is the fact that they have a fair amount of choice in how they do this. So the in-person synchronous training, it's not in person, sorry, it's virtual, but it's synchronous. All of those days are happening during contracted PD days. So they're not getting any extra compensation for that. That's on duty days. But all the asynchronous work, which I think if I remember right, it's around 60-ish hours in total. They have some choice. They can do it on a contract day and get a sub. They could do it on a day like Tuesday when they were supposed to be working and working from home. Or they can do it outside the contract day and submit for compensation. And the amount of compensation was placed right in the MOU. Right now, 340, yeah, 345 for each module, and there are 8 modules.
What if everybody does that option? Is that like a
Most
break
costly.
bank?
That's the
Type
most
deal,
costly,
or-
yeah.
So is a significant chunk if everybody were to say, yeah, pay me another,
Well, when I did the napkin math on this last year, I was figuring it's gonna cost us about $80,000 and the revenue we get, it was like 28 or I can't remember.
I don't remember.
It was,
Exact
it's a lot more than what they gave us. So it's general fund dollars. Professional development dollars.
well,
So anyway, we got to their CCEA overwhelmingly already approved it as their whole rank and file had to vote on it.
Great.
I'm really becoming a fiscal conservative guy. I don't know when this happened, but oh man, I don't know what's going on with me.
Well, apparently we're the only district in our area and that's not the red, so maybe we need people
Good
like you.
job. All right, and so we just need a motion for this.
Ow. So
I second.
Okay, further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. 8.5 is to accept our donations for January 2025. Are in the packet here.
are we sending out thank yous?
Yes,
Thank
yeah.
Okay, there's that.
Yeah, and any of the donations that are coming to the Washington DC group, the kids are getting cards together, sending thank yous out.
Oh, awesome.
Deb White was always really good at making sure thank yous went out, so try to, in her honor, make sure I ask, are we sending out thank yous?
For sure. Great, well, we just need a motion to accept these.
So equipment has to be, I'm just curious about process. Equipment has to be approved? Or is it just listed just to be dot your i's and whatnot?
Equipment that is donated, we do that for public record.
Oh, okay.
We don't get into the business of determining how much value it is for like a
Right,
tax
so
receipt.
just everything.
We just put on.
Yeah, makes sense.
Sure.
There's probably some sort of statutory thing that says over this X amount you have to, and just don't even mess with it. Gotcha.
It
I
also,
think I'm always, oh,
no, I was just gonna say, it also gives those people something to grab if they want.
receipt.
oh, yeah. Well, oh, I'll make a motion.
I'll second this.
Further discussion?
With thanks.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
no
you.
doubt.
Yep,
It's a nice list.
we got a lot of donations this
Appreciative
month,
of all that
so
support.
thank you so much, very generous. For sure. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. All right, 9.0 are personnel items. 9.1 is our slate for this month of new hires, resignations, leaves of absence.
The check and connect position is tied to revenue we get from NLC. So it's revenue neutral for us to have this position. It's actually paid for kind of out of two buckets because we also got that attendance grant. So new revenue, new expense.
And what is that like the check and connect portion of it? Is that like a teacher role? What is that?
It's a para role here. It could be in some districts. So ultimately, it's a very systematic, evidence-based program where they go get trained on how to do it and they systematically check in with an assigned caseload of families. Usually tied to truancy and other issues.
Have we had a check and connect counselor before?
Not a formal.
No. Okay.
No, we've tried and hired and they left and now we're trying again.
Okay.
Is this something we're hoping is a continual role? This is,
Yeah, as long as the funding stays there.
and it's at para rate.
Yep.
The entire part of it. Okay.
Great. Do we have a motion?
Motion. Accept.
Oh, I'll second. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I need a policy apparently enacted from MSBA.
And a whole like behavioral team to swoop in on.
That's right. I need to be swooped.
All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That was funny.
Those opposed? Motion carries.
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
All right. We're adjourned 6:01, 59 minutes. Good job, people.
Time to get to the 6:30